Hi there, I'm Miriam and I'd like to share with you some findings from my study on professional childminding in Ireland, Ecocultural Perspectives. And this study was conducted thanks to funding from Childminding Ireland and the Irish Research Council. So I hope you enjoy the presentations on my findings. Why did I start the study? Well, there was a problem. Lack of regulation and lack of research. Childminders care for 10% of children in Ireland, aged 0 to 12, which is roughly 88,000 children in 2017, according to the CSO. This means that there are probably between 20,000 and 35,000 childminders in the country, depending on how many children you think each childminder may be minding. However, less than 1% of these childminders registered under current regulations, which most recently was around 83 childminders. Furthermore, there is a lack of research into Irish childminding. There have been 2 small studies, but nothing at a national level. And there's also a dearth of research on childminding in Europe, which, as the core report pointed out, really required its own study. And lastly, regulation of all paid childminding is now being proposed by the DCUA. The action plan is currently being drafted. So this research is never more needed than now. What did I set out to find out? Well, I wanted to document the practices of Irish childminders. What were they doing at home all day with the children? I wanted to describe the pedagogy of childminding, what kind of learning and development opportunities were being offered to children in childminding settings. I wanted to interrogate the concept of professionalism as it applies to childminder and examine the process of professionalisation among childminders. How do childminders become professionals? The framework I used was ecocultural theory primarily, and this theory looks at groups of people in niches, ecological niches. What's particular about it is derived from cultural and social psychology, cross-cultural studies, ethnographies, and so on. And so it focuses on the group. And key, though, to it, a key difference is that it focuses also on the meaning that the group, people within the group apply to what they do, as well as their constraints, the characteristics of their niches, and how congruent they are with their needs, and whether or not they are sustainable long-term. So I took this concept of an ecocultural niche and applied it to a childminding setting. It had previously been done for classrooms and all kinds of groups. I also referred to the bioecological model of human development. The microsystem is quite similar to a niche, but I used this in particular to consider the impact of policy on childminding settings. I also referred to attachment theory because I found childminders themselves often referred to attachment theory to describe their relationship with children in terms of bonding and so on. Furthermore, I looked at the policy context in Ireland, Europe, and the USA, which is pretty big. And I reviewed international research since 1990. So this is how I conducted my research. In phase 1 between 2014 and 16, I conducted an online surveys of childminders and parents, really to find out what was the impact of the National Childminding Initiative on attitudes towards regulation and so on. After that, in 2015, I conducted a World Cafe Forum with childminders from Childminding Ireland. The main finding from that was that childminders and parents were open to regulation once it did not compromise the essential nature of childminding, which of course begs the question, what is the essential nature of childminding? And for that, I turned to the ecocultural framework. I used the ecocultural family interview, especially adapted for childminders. This had begun life in California in a study among childminders there, and so it was adapted further for use in Ireland. It uses the daily routine of the childminder to discover what cultural models are undergirding her practice. So childcare, early years care, is not some abstract concept. It actually materializes in the practices and the things we do every day. And if you want to find out what you really believe in, look at what you do every day. So the lens of the daily routine allows you to discover what the cultural models are, those unspoken, shared assumptions that guide your everyday life. as part of that, photographs taken by the participants were used as prompts in the conversation. And that uncovered a lot to do with emotions and values and feelings about work, the childminding work. Also, field notes were taken, and a background case study survey looked at childminders' attitudes towards parenting and job satisfaction and things like that. So what I found? Well, firstly, I found what I described as a close relationship model of praxis. This was also found in the Californian study. Strong relationships are prioritized. Love, affection, and fun are what the childminder is seeking throughout the day. Interactions are particularly important in care, in play, in conversation. And they want to create a lovely togetherness in the small group, which is typically in the childminding setting of no more than 6. I also found that lasting relationships are developed. So these enduring relationships continue outside the childcare. Many of them would have taken children on outings apart from work, and also after the arrangement is over, you know, for like going to children's communions and confirmations, even when they're no longer in the service. The childminding service was conceptualized as an extended family. So they didn't consider the children as their own, but more as if they were maybe nieces, nephews, or grandchildren, something like that. And that was sort of how the close relationship model looked. And then I looked at pedagogy, and I found that childminders had articulated a real-life learning model of pedagogy, and that's what they called themselves, the real-life learning. Flexible learning is prioritized. It's child-led. It's whatever interests the child, and it's relationship-driven. So it's in the relationship between the child and the childminder. They explore whatever is intriguing the childminder in everyday experience, in everyday life, in the unhurried, low-stress, home-from-home environment. Almost all of the participants in this phase of the study had mixed age group of children. And so there was a lovely opportunities for scaffolding, for older children to teach or to model learning for the younger ones, and actually learn themselves from being teachers. So there was a really good use of mixed age group care in helping children to grow and develop in an enriched home and outdoor environment with lots of great equipment and arts and crafts materials and so on, as well as regular outings in the community, whether that be the park, the local play group, but children were not confined to the home all the time. So as regards professionalism then, I discovered a very important concept was agency. Agency drives childminder views of professionalism. They are independent, autonomous, and self-directed. And they see this as coming from within as opposed to being imposed by regulation. So one childminder, for example, was making over her service using only natural materials in all her toys and so on. And she saw that as a personal mark of her. She was putting her stamp on her service. So an ecocultural definition of professional childminding could be that childminding is a home-based ecological niche in which the childminder works together with children, their own family, children's families and assistants to negotiate the project of raising children. And the childminder is actually key in this, because without the childminder, it doesn't matter how many children or families there will be no niche. It takes the childminder's autonomy and agency to make the service happen. Another aspect of professionalism I found was a shared code of conduct, which intimated a cultural model of professionalism for childminders. Being trustworthy was considered vital. You were being trusted with the most sacred thing, a child. And so they really placed a very high value on being completely trustworthy in their dealings with children. They also wanted to be reliable for the family, to the extent that some of them would work while sick or even have their partner take a day off so that the family would not be let down, and flexible in terms of, providing maybe unusual hours and so on. So an ecocultural view of childminder professionalism then, I think, would have to say that childminding professionalism is seen in the alignment of childminders' praxis with locally relevant ideals, such as being trustworthy, reliable, and flexible, and cultural models of children's learning and development, such as the close relationship model and the real life learning model. When we came to look at professionalisation, I had started with looking at the standard paradigm for professionalisation in the care workers realm, which has said that since the rising levels of education were the starting point, rising levels of qualifications and so on, with the purpose of seeking improved conditions and career prospects. Their need was, of course, for collaborative relationships in order to get these improved conditions and career prospects. And the outcome was distinctive approaches, such that now, today, early years care and education has a very distinctive ethos and approach, which is quite different, for example, to primary teaching. And that has been as the result of a process of professionalisation. When I looked at childminders, though, in detail, it actually looked quite different. So rather than pursuing qualifications as a means to becoming professionals, childminders typically started as parents wanting to stay home with their own child or children. And their purpose was to create a stable family niche where the financial support of childminding allowed the parent to remain with their children and provide care and education in accordance with their own beliefs and values, while providing care for children from other families, a lovely environment for other families who wanted a similar kind of ethos for their children. With that in mind, they were most interested in kind of relevant education. Most of the participants had level 5, which they had undertaken once they had begun childminding for the most part. And, but most of them also said that it wasn't all completely relevant to childminding. They were most interested in just-in-time education, as Holly Tunyan in California says. They wanted education that would meet the need when they needed it. And they also desired to have supportive supervision rather than, or in preference to, perhaps, inspection. So because of the nature of their emotional labor, the professional love that they provide, as Jules Page calls it, they felt a greater need for supportive supervision, more like what social workers might need, rather than inspection, which simply requires compliance. And the outcome which they sought above all was recognition of difference, that childminding would be recognized as a different form of early years care and provision and education, and that it would be honored as such. So my conclusion, in conclusion then, what is required for a sustainable early years childminding system is ecocultural alignment. To be sustainable, any regulatory and support system for childminding must align with its cultural models and ideals. Trying to squeeze it into the existing model is obviously not working. It is not, childminders are not engaging with it. So to be truly engaging and truly gain the interest and involvement of professional childminders, I think that any regulatory system will have to align with the cultural models of real life learning and close relationships, as well as the ideals of professionalism around flexibility, reliability, and trustworthiness. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much for your time and attention. I hope you enjoyed the presentation and that you've learned something about childminding in Ireland.